It started like a whisper inside the palace walls, faint, unbelievable, and far too dangerous to repeat out loud. But then, the whisper found its way online. Within hours, it turned into a storm that could rewrite royal history itself. People said a new set of hospital files had surfaced, files that didn't match any of the official records tied to Meghan Markle's pregnancies. Dates were off. Signatures didn't align. Some entries were missing altogether. Suddenly, the perfect royal fairy tale began to sound like a mystery script no one had meant to write, according to the chatter flooding late-night forums. The paperwork didn't show a single confirmed record of Meghan Markle ever giving birth, not in London, not in California, not anywhere. For years, skeptics had thrown theories into the wind, but this time, the so-called receipts looked too precise to ignore. And just like that, the conversation shifted from rumor to investigation. Every claim pointed toward the same question that no one wanted to ask. What if the story the world celebrated was never what it seemed? Some claimed a medical insider had stepped forward, saying the timelines around the Duchess's pregnancies simply didn't line up. A small detail here, a missing entry there, and suddenly the royal narrative began to crack like glass under pressure. That's when a woman calling herself a doctor appeared on an obscure podcast, claiming she'd seen information that turned everything upside down. In her calm, measured voice, she suggested that Meghan Markle might never have carried either of her two children. She said she was willing to show evidence. And then she added a twist that sent social media spiraling, that powerful corporate interests were protecting the truth because the Duchess was, as she put it, connected to bigger forces than the palace itself. It sounded wild, absurd, impossible, but silence from the people involved made it grow louder. No lawsuits, no denials, no clarifications. Just nothing. And in today's world, silence often sounds like confession. The woman insisted she wasn't trying to defame anyone, only to expose what she called medical inconsistencies. She even referenced Trevor Engelson, Meghan's ex-husband, and her brother's old comments, claiming they had once hinted at health complications that could have made natural pregnancy difficult. None of that could be verified, yet the internet didn't care. It ran with it, building a theory that Meghan Markle might have gone through a medical procedure years ago that made childbirth impossible. If that were true, people asked, then how were their royal children? The debate split the internet in two. Supporters said the Duchess deserved privacy. Critics called it deception. But in the middle of the noise, another name surfaced, Prince Harry. Some claimed his own childhood surgery and reported medication might have affected fertility. It was messy, personal, and deeply invasive. Yet it spread like wildfire because it fed into the same obsession, the idea that the royal baby story didn't add up. Then came the photograph, the one the palace had proudly shared of baby Archie's baptism. On the surface, it was beautiful, lace gown, golden lighting, the new parents glowing with pride. But online investigators checked the metadata, that invisible timestamp embedded in every digital image, and what they found added fuel to the fire. The photo wasn't taken in July, as the palace announcement had claimed. It was dated May 8, barely 2 days after Archie's supposed birth. So people asked, would anyone stage a baptism shoot when the mother should still be in post-delivery recovery? Why were royal guests dressed in full formal wear so soon? Was it a coincidence, or a production? Even royal insiders seemed unsure. Some blamed editing delays. Others whispered that the picture had been taken earlier and recycled for optics. No one could agree, but everyone could feel the tension building. Things got worse when reporters noticed the palace's own press releases didn't match. The first bulletin announced that Meghan Markle had gone into labor. Just hours later, another statement claimed the baby had already been born. It wasn't excitement, it was confusion. And confusion, in a family famous for protocol, always looks suspicious. From there, the narrative only deepened. People began piecing together screenshots, timelines, and even flight data, trying to locate where the Duchess really was during those key days. Some said she had been spotted elsewhere. Others argued those sightings were staged. No one could prove anything. But that uncertainty became the oxygen that kept the fire burning. Then the so-called doctor returned online for one final revelation, calm, certain, unflinching. She repeated, the two children aren't biologically hers. She didn't provide hospital proof, only claimed trusted insiders had checked the records and found nothing under Meghan's name. She hinted at private arrangements, surrogate involvement, and secrecy justified as royal discretion. The statement might have vanished in the usual tide of internet rumors, except that it didn't. No cease and desist letters appeared. The story wasn't scrubbed. And for millions watching, that absence of pushback became the biggest clue of all. Across social media, creators dissected every clip, every gesture, every sentence Meghan Markle ever said about motherhood. They slowed down interviews, zoomed into body language, claimed they saw discomfort when she mentioned her pregnancies. Whether true or imagined didn't matter anymore. The perception stuck. By the end of that week, hashtags like #royal cover-up and #where are the records trended globally. News outlets refused to touch it, but independent voices filled the silence. The palace stayed quiet. The Duchess said nothing. And in that silence, the world found its own answer, or at least the version it wanted to believe. The palace lights never go out, but lately they've started to flicker. Behind those walls, the silence feels louder than any statement ever could. You can almost sense it, a tension in the air, like everyone's waiting for someone else to speak first. Because now the rumors aren't whispers anymore. They're headlines, theories, podcasts, investigations. And the one question hanging over Buckingham Palace is simple but devastating. What if the royal story the world believed was never real? Every royal birth in modern history comes with paperwork, witnesses, and signatures, the crown's way of protecting the bloodline. But when people began searching for Archie's and Lilibet's official records, something strange happened. The names appeared, but the details didn't. No attending physician listed. No public confirmation. Just blank spaces where truth was supposed to be. And in those blank spaces, imagination took over. Independent researchers began connecting the dots, or trying to. They compared news timestamps, flight paths, and even metadata from photographs. They noticed that the timing of Meghan Markle's supposed hospital visits didn't match the palace's announcements. First, they said she was in labor. Then, within hours, they said the baby was already born. To the public, it looked like excitement. But to those watching closely, it looked like a story being rewritten in real time. The theory grew darker when the same mysterious doctor returned online. Calm voice. No emotion. Just words that froze millions of listeners. She claimed that the so-called birth records were digitally reconstructed, not genuine hospital logs, but files entered later to fill the gap. She didn't show proof, only insisted that her sources worked within the system and knew the truth. And when the interview ended, the world was split in two, believers and defenders, both certain the other side had lost its mind. Still, something about the palace's silence made people uneasy. Because when the British press questions the crown, there's usually a quick correction. A polished denial. A quote from a close source. But this time, nothing. Days passed, then weeks, and the story kept growing without a single official word. Even supporters began to ask, why not just show the records? A single photo from the hospital, a doctor's signature, it would end everything. But that moment never came. Instead, the palace doubled down on image. Smiling portraits, glossy interviews, charity appearances. Every gesture felt rehearsed, every quote carefully written. And then came the phrase that shook royal watchers everywhere: if the paperwork doesn't exist, neither does the legitimacy. In royal law, a child without documented parentage cannot legally inherit the line of succession. It wasn't just gossip anymore, it was potential constitutional chaos. Behind closed doors, insiders whispered that aides were terrified. To admit even the smallest inconsistency could open a floodgate the monarchy wouldn't survive. So, they did what institutions always do when cornered: they buried the story under kindness. Diversions. New projects. Smiling distractions, but Meghan Markle's silence became the biggest statement of all. Some called it grace. Others called it control. Because if she truly held a secret big enough to shake the monarchy, silence would be her weapon. Then, as if on cue, another contradiction surfaced. In one interview, Meghan said she left the UK while pregnant with Lilibet. But travel records showed she and Prince Harry had moved months earlier. Another time, she described a hospital discharge that no medical professional would ever approve. The inconsistencies piled up like dominoes, and once you start noticing them, you can't unsee them. Every appearance afterward was dissected frame by frame. Her body language, her tone, even the way Harry looked at her when she mentioned the children. Analysts claimed to spot tension, distance, guilt. Maybe imagination, maybe truth, but the perception stuck. Then came the biggest blow, a supposed insider leak claiming that the palace knew about the confusion but feared addressing it publicly. We were told to focus on optics, not evidence, the source allegedly said. Real or fake, it sounded believable enough to fuel another round of chaos. And at that point, belief was stronger than fact. Social media called it the crown's quiet scandal. No one could prove anything, yet everyone felt certain something was wrong. The palace's silence turned into its own kind of confession. Weeks later, a journalist published an editorial that summed it all up in one chilling line: truth doesn't vanish, it just waits for the right day to be found. The quote went viral overnight. It became a rallying cry for those convinced the royal narrative was built on illusion. Now the story lives in limbo, not proven, not denied, suspended between two worlds, the official fairy tale and the unofficial truth. Every new royal event reignites the debate. Every photo of the children spawns 1,000 threads asking if the timeline finally makes sense, but maybe that's the point. Maybe the power of this mystery isn't in the answers but in the silence itself. Because as long as no one confirms anything, the story never dies. It grows. It evolves. It becomes legend. So here we are, years later, still staring at the same unanswered question: if truth always leaves a trace? Why hasn't anyone found it yet? Maybe the files exist. Maybe they don't. Maybe the world just saw what it wanted to see, a perfect modern fairy tale wrapped in royal branding. Or maybe, somewhere in a locked drawer inside Buckingham Palace, there's a document that could change everything, and if that day ever comes, if the truth ever escapes those walls, the crown may never shine the same again.